everyone, it's Jill Foster here for another PB&J card class. And in today's video, I will be making a trio of cards, each featuring the same layout, but some fun coloring techniques using some Arteza real brush pens. And I'll give you a closer look at those in just a minute. Here's some peeks again at the cards that we will be making. Those real brush pens are a water-based marker with what I would describe as like a paintbrush tip. And there's some really fun techniques that you can do with those. And I'll be showing 3 different ways to color with those, one for each of the cards we'll be making. Now, all of these cards were inspired by this beautiful card that you can see here by Bridget Edblum, and I will have a link to her card and her blog post down in the YouTube description box below. You can see it inspired me to create a sketch from this design, which I will loosely base all of my cards on. All of the cards feature that main focal element right in the center of the design with sort of a partial circle frame. All of the die cuts here and stamps are by Penny Black, and that is how I created that partial frame as well as that stitched outline around the outer edge. Now the bright coloring is with those Arteza water brush, the real brush pens. And the kind folks at Arteza have also offered for all of you Penny Black fans a 10% off coupon code. So I will put a link to that down in the YouTube description box below if you want to check out the products that I am using from Arteza. Now, speaking of products, there will be a full supply list up on screen at the very end of the video. So if you want to check it out, you can hit pause and look at it further. Then it'll have all the colors. Everything that I'm using in the video will be listed. So to begin, I'm going to do my stamping, and this is the Penny Black Peaceful Miniature 3x4 inch stamp, and it has the matching die. And I am inking my stamps with VersaFine Onyx Black ink and stamping them onto watercolor paper. This is a cold press paper. I'm stamping them in the Misty Stamping Positioning Tool so that I can just get a couple of impressions. Now I mentioned those real brush pens from Arteza. Here is a closer look at those. I am using the set of 48, and you get all of these luscious colors, lots of really great bold colors, a nice range of colors within each, and then also some really good neutrals. And you can see here I've pulled out some of my favorites that I will be working with in the video today. For a closer look at these, you can see they have a pretty wide brush tip on the end, and to me this brush tip feels a lot like a paintbrush would feel. So you can do some really fun techniques with them. The color is very bold. I'm also using the water brushes, and I am using a variety of different sizes, and these are from Arteza. Again, all of that's linked below, as well as links to the Penny Black online shop where you can find each of these stamps and dies. So I'm going to begin, and I'm going to do 3 different techniques with these markers, one for each card. So I'll zoom in here and speed things up a bit for the coloring. For this first technique, I am just putting down my color directly onto the paper with the marker. And then I'm going to go in with that water brush pen and just very lightly blend it out. Now this is the Arteza watercolor paper, and it is a artist quality 100% cotton paper. So the colors, because think of cotton like a fabric, they really do absorb into the paper. So it is a slight blending when you go in with the water. So if you like to have a little bit more control when you do your blending, this paper works really well for that. If you like the color to sit more like right on top of the paper and allow you to go in and really move it with the brush pen, I recommend then you might want to play around with different papers so you get a different look with depending on what kind of paper you use. So I'm following the same technique here, and you can see when I put that on, I'm almost using that actual marker tip like it is a paintbrush, sort of feathering it on. And you can see here how you can just beautifully blend both of those colors together, and it just is really easy to do and get some dynamic looks onto your coloring. So for the body of the bird, I'm coming in with some pink. I love that this particular stamp has a very whimsical look, so you can really just go wild with your colors. no need to make your birds look realistic. It just, whatever you do looks nice with this bird just because of the fun way that it is illustrated. So I colored that on and then I blended it out. And now I'm going to go in with more of a red. And while that is still even just a little bit damp, I'm just putting in a touch more darker shading there right underneath the wing and then blending it out with that lighter pink. Now I didn't notice any cross-contamination onto my markers, but if you get a little bit of a darker color onto a lighter color marker tip, you can just color it onto a piece of scratch paper until it is removed and your color goes back to the initial color. I'm going to go in here and put that pink right up here on top of his head and then blend it out with the water brush. Now I also have a paper towel off to the side where I can dab off any excess from my water brush. Just sometimes, you know, you just get a little bit more than you want and you want less water on your brush and you can dab it off on the paper towel. I also have a cup of water that I use just to rinse it off in between colors. Now I wanted that yellow color on the body there, and so I have just pulled in an acrylic block, just an old acrylic block. I'm going to make sure that that is dry, and then I'm going to color with the marker onto the acrylic block and pick it up with the water brush, and that just allows me to put a very light version of that yellow onto the bird. And I'll be doing some more with that technique on a different card in this video. But you can see there the range of color you can get just with that yellow, how dark it is on the wing, and then how light I've done it up near his eye. I'm going to follow the same direct to paper technique on the rest of the image, putting down the color, coloring with the marker where I want the color to be the darkest. Like I said, this paper absorbs that ink from the marker, so it's not all going to blend and move. So wherever you put it is going to remain a little bit darker. I also recommend working in sections, so I wouldn't want to color everything and then wait a long time and go back and blend it with water, but rather just work in sections, just allowing yourself to be able to pick up some of that marker color while it's still, some of it is still sitting up sort of on that top layer of the paper. Now for these leaves, I color them all with a lighter green, and then I'm going in with a darker green with a feathering motion, and that's all that's really needed for those leaves. There's not much to do on those with blending with water. Here I went in with an even lighter color, and on these leaves that are a bit more open and you can see the shading more, I'm going to use a variety of colors. I'm even going to pull in a little bit of a light blue. And sort of a turquoise color. And I have all of the exact color names listed at the very end of the video, also the exact numbers for the stamps and dies and everything used. And again, that's up on screen. Now you can see here I can go in with my water brush and blend those multiple colors together and get a really dynamic look on those leaves. And this goes really pretty fast. I found that this method for coloring went quite quickly. Now for the little berries, I'm just coloring them in. I'm not going to go back in and do any blending with water. There's really not much need on those. They're so small. And I hope you don't mind. This video is a bit longer, so I hope you don't get too bored with me. But I wanted to be able to show, for the most part, the coloring process from beginning to end for each of the images. And also show the multiple techniques for the markers and look at some of these really beautiful stamps and dies. So you can see these do have a pretty wide tip on them, the markers, but with a light pressure you can do pretty detailed coloring like I'm doing there on the legs and the feet of the bird and also the beak. Now because this paper was pretty absorbent, I did have a little bit of bleeding outside of the lines just because I was pretty heavy-handed with my water and also coloring directly with the marker onto the paper. But you can use a white gel pen just to cover up any parts that go out of the lines. I found my white gel pen worked really well on this particular paper. And it's fun then once that's dry to go back in with the marker and add even darker shading just right on top. So those are the same colors that I used when I first applied the color, but because I'm not using any water with them right now, they're pretty dark and dynamic. Or not dark, but bold. And by no means do you have to do all of these steps, but I just love to color. So for me, it's fun to just go back and keep adding details and playing with the colors and what you can achieve with them. This bird is actually a really fun stamp to work with. I've said this in other videos before. Sometimes birds scare me a little bit when I am going to color them in, but this one I really like for two reasons. One, the different sections of the body and the wing and the head are very clearly delineated, so you don't have to worry about where to stop and start colors. And also, like I said before, because it's very whimsical, you can just pick whatever colors you like and not have to worry about it looking realistic or matching up with what particular bird it is in real life. So I'm going to do some more coloring. Next I'm going to color the miniature 3x4 inch stamp called Blushing, and this also has the exact match die, Blushing cutout. And for this one, I again stamped it using VersaFine Onyx Black ink onto watercolor paper. But for this coloring with these markers, I am not going to go in with the water. So I am starting with the lighter color. I'm adding a darker color where I want the shadow to be, then going back with that same lighter color and just coloring right over top and blending it out. And this gives really bold, gorgeous coloring. This also goes very quickly because you're not going back and forth between the water. You don't have to wait for things to dry. This was probably my favorite way of using these pens. So again, just putting down the light color, adding the dark where I would want the shadow to be, and very lightly going back and blending that out with the lighter color. Now something else you can do here is sort of blend or morph into a different color. So here I wanted the center to have more of an orangish yellow. So as I got there, I added the yellow color, then a bit of shading with an orange, going back and blending it with the yellow. You can see I left a little bit of the tip of that petal white, and I'm actually going to go back in with that light pink right over the top of that. And that gives you sort of a nice blend from the outer petals looking more pink and red into more of an orange and yellow. So coloring it in with the yellow, adding some shading with an orange, and then blending that back with the yellow, and then going in on that little tip where I left it white with that light pink and just sort of flicking that down into the yellow. For the leaves, I'm going to start by coloring them with a lighter green. And just sort of getting that same feeling like I'm just painting on with these markers, using them almost like that is a paintbrush, the same kind of motions that I would use with a paintbrush. Then I will go in with a darker green. And you can see here where the leaves really start to get some life with that darker green on there. And then going back with the initial lighter green, feathering on top of the darker and then blending it out. And like I said before, I didn't notice too much transfer onto that lighter color when I did the blending. But if you do, you can just color on a scratch paper and your marker should be fine. I did leave a little bit of the tip of these white, so I could just add a touch of blue up there, which will turn into a turquoise when it starts mixing in with the green. And there's no right or wrong combinations of colors for these. I just, when I got my set, just sat down and played on some scratch paper, pulled out the colors, tried them out, and just found some to start with that I really loved together, and then just stuck with those for all three of these cards. And then finally, once I was finished with that, I just used a white gel pen to add some detail to the center of this flower. For the third coloring technique, I'm going to use another miniature 3 by 4 inch stamp from Penny Black called Golden Dance, along with the Exact Match Creative Die Golden Dance cutout. Now for this, I'm going to use these markers to create palette of color. So just got an old acrylic block there. I'm scribbling the markers on the top of it. And then I'm going to go in with the water brush. First put a little bit of water onto my image. And this just helps these blend very easily and stay nice and light for this portion of the image. Then pick up some of that color and just paint it in. And you can see there by having that layer of water, things stay pretty light, very easy to blend. And just kind of shading that or fading that out to white towards the center of the planter. So this is just another way that you can use these Arteza real brush pens because they are water-based. That's what allows you to do all of these fun techniques. So I'm just going to continue to put that color down. Now for a little extra interest, I'm going to use a little touch of that green. Just sort of mix it in there, and you can see how immediately that just sort of brings all of that to life. Just dropping it in while everything is still wet. And I also have the water brush pen there, so that also helps with the blending, keeping things wet while I'm working. One thing I really love about all of these stamps that I'm using today is they do have the exact match die, which makes assembling your card and the design possibilities once all of your coloring is done very easy to do. And it also works really well for the sketch that I created inspired by Bridget's beautiful card that I showed at the beginning of the video. So I'm going to continue painting these in, following the same technique, just coloring onto that acrylic block and picking it up and painting it on. Now on these flowers, I did not put a layer of water down first. I am just picking that up with the water brush and putting it right onto the flowers. And this is that same color of pink that I used on that larger flower before. So you can see the difference in from how dark that first flower, or that actually the second flower that we colored where we put the markers directly to the paper, that was very dark, very rich. And here where that pink is very light, very soft. And even when I go in with this darker red to add shading, it still keeps a sort of a loose, soft look. I did use, just for time purposes, colored right into the center of the flower with the yellow. And then while that's still wet, I am just adding a little touch with the marker right on top just to get some darker shadows in there, a little bit more contrast. And I'll just follow that same process for all of the flowers up at the top. And now I'm ready to work on the leaves. And these, I'm just picking up the color, starting by coloring it towards sort of the base of the leaf, and then working my way out towards the tip. And I'm leaving the tips with a little bit of lightness there. So wherever I put that water brush down first, that's going to be typically where the darkest color is going to be. And then as I am coloring, it starts to fade out because the pigment starts to blend into the paper and become less and less as I work my way out. Then I can go in with a darker green and just add a few shadows in the very darkest areas. And you can see how that adds a lot of dimension. Just a touch here and there where those ones would sort of be tucked underneath in the little crevices and crannies of those leaves. And then finally, again, I just used a white gel pen to add a little pop of white up in those flowers, and that really does bring them to life. So now we're ready to start assembling the cards and creating the cards based off that beautiful design by Bridget Edblum. So I have cut using Penny Black stitch square and circles. That outer square is cut with that, as well as this inner circular frame. And then I just trim that, seeing where my flower would be positioned. And that's something I love about Bridget's design, is that sort of partial circular frame with the main element extending beyond. Now I wanted to add some color behind that. So once I know where that partial circular frame is going to be, I'm going to just do some painting onto that background paper. So I'll move my flower out of the way, and then using some very watered down ink from the markers from the acrylic block, I'm just going to lightly paint a wash onto that background panel. I'm using a larger size brush for this, and then I just kind of put my flower back on there to see if I need to add more color, if I want to darken it up, if I want more contrast, and then how far I want to go sort of up towards that right hand corner of the card. And you can see there how handy these stamp and die sets are with that exact match die for this technique and for this layout. One thing I love about this layout though is it works for elegant cards and floral cards like I'm doing today, but this would also be really fun with cute critters. Pretty much any design that you can die cut out and pop up on top would look pretty with this card layout. I added a little bit of green into that blue just to get more of a turquoise color, and then I mounted the elements using foam adhesive and added the sentiment, and the card was complete. So I'll just show you one more time here how I created this background. Here I'm using the bird, just trimming off the excess from that circular frame, and then going in and painting this in. You can see there when I first put down that water brush, I had quite a bit of ink on there and not a lot of water, so I did get a bit of sort of like a splotch of color. So it's fine, I can blend it out and just make that corner a little bit darker, but you can see here where I was learning from that and putting down some more water before I put down the actual ink color. And then you can see it just very easily blends out. And just going back and forth to see if I'm happy with the placement of that watercoloring, if I want to get more, moving out towards that outer or that upper right hand corner. And I will just finish that up. And to finish this card, again, I mounted everything with foam squares, the bird, and that circular frame. I did add our Penny Black leaves die cut around and some sequins, just for a little added interest around that frame. And then here's a look at the other card. I just followed the same technique but used the yellow color behind these flowers. And this time I just created sort of a U shape with that partial circular frame and added those flowers and some sequins. I thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video and are inspired to give these techniques and this card layout a try. If you did enjoy today's video, please also be sure to give it a thumbs up and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can connect with Penny Black on Facebook, Pinterest, Twitter, Instagram, as well as our website and blog, and all of those will be linked down in the YouTube description box below. And stay tuned here at the end. As promised, I will put all of the supplies used up on screen on the video. Thanks for watching.